Professor Catherine Sterling pointed toward the door, her manicured fingers stabbing the air like a weapon. The 35-year-old mathematics prodigy had just humiliated Jamal Washington in front of 30 graduate students, treating him like dirt beneath her designer heels. Jamal's hands froze on his cleaning cart. Every eye in the lecture hall burned into his back as students smirked at the entertainment. Sterling stood beside her blackboard covered in complex equations, her PhD certificates gleaming on the wall behind her like trophies of intellectual superiority. But instead of leaving, Jamal stepped closer to the mathematical proof she'd been demonstrating. His dark eyes scanned the elegant symbols with an intensity that made Sterling's confident smile falter for just a moment. "Actually, Professor," Jamal said quietly, his voice cutting through the silence, "there's an error in your third line." The room exploded into shocked whispers. What happens when the person you underestimate knows more than you do? The humiliation echoed through Whitmore University's marble halls like a battle cry. Within hours, whispers spread across the elite campus. The janitor had dared challenge Professor Catherine Sterling, mathematics department's rising star. Sterling's corner office overlooked manicured lawns where students in designer clothes debated theories over expensive coffee. Her walls displayed certificates from Harvard, MIT, and Cambridge, a shrine to intellectual superiority. Published papers bore her name in prestigious journals. At faculty dinner parties, she discussed research with Nobel laureates while sipping wine that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Meanwhile, Jamal Washington pushed his cleaning cart through academic buildings after sunset. His 6-to-2 shift covered 3 separate facilities, emptying trash, mopping floors, restocking supplies. During brief breaks, he studied advanced mathematics textbooks hidden behind maintenance manuals. Coffee-stained notebooks filled with complex proofs occupied his locker alongside cleaning chemicals. The campus hierarchy was crystal clear. Students paid $65,000 per year for the privilege of breathing Whitmore's rarefied air. Faculty members lived in ivory towers, their intelligence measured by publications and grants. Support staff remained invisible, human furniture existing only to maintain the academic paradise. Sterling had never questioned this natural order. Intelligence required proper breeding, expensive education, and social connections. She dated Dr. Marcus Webb from Harvard's mathematics department, reinforcing her belief that brilliance belonged exclusively to the credentialed elite. When maintenance workers entered her classroom, she automatically assumed they lacked the intellectual capacity for meaningful conversation. Security guards routinely questioned Jamal's presence in academic buildings after regular hours. Students moved their bags when he entered study areas, treating him like a potential threat. Faculty members looked through him as if he were invisible, their conversations halting whenever he approached. But Sterling's perfectly ordered world was about to crack. The annual Eilers Challenge represented mathematical excellence at its finest. $50,000 in automatic PhD admission to any participating university awaited the winner. International mathematics departments watched the competition religiously, using results to recruit talent and measure academic prestige. Sterling served as head judge, her reputation built on identifying true mathematical genius. For 15 years, she had correctly predicted which candidates possessed the intellectual depth for advanced research. Her judgment was considered infallible among academic circles. This year promised to be her greatest triumph. 12 candidates had qualified: Harvard PhD students, MIT researchers, Yale scholars. Each possessed impeccable credentials and years of formal training. The competition would showcase proper mathematical education at its finest. But something nagged at Sterling's confidence. That evening's incident replayed in her mind like a broken record. Jamal's observation about her proof had been correct, embarrassingly so. She had spent 20 minutes reworking the equations before finding her computational error. How had a janitor spotted something she had missed? Sterling rationalized the anomaly. Lucky guess. Perhaps he had overheard graduate student discussions. Maybe someone had helped him identify the mistake. Janitors certainly didn't understand advanced topology through independent study, yet doubt crept into her thoughts during quiet moments. Jamal's mathematical handwriting had appeared surprisingly sophisticated. His explanation of the error demonstrated genuine understanding, not mere memorization. Something about his analytical approach felt familiar, almost professional. She pushed these uncomfortable thoughts aside. The natural order demanded respect. Intelligence followed predictable patterns: proper education, formal training, academic credentials. Exceptions didn't exist in her carefully constructed worldview. During faculty meetings, Sterling discussed maintaining academic standards. She emphasized the importance of rigorous evaluation, ensuring only qualified candidates accessed advanced education. Her colleagues nodded approvingly, trusting her judgment about mathematical talent. But late at night, when campus grew quiet and Jamal's cleaning cart echoed through empty hallways, Sterling found herself wondering about the man behind the uniform. What drove someone to work 3 jobs while studying mathematics in stolen moments? What kind of mind could spot errors that escaped Harvard-educated professors? These questions threatened everything she believed about intelligence, education, and social hierarchy. The Euler's challenge would settle these doubts once and for all. Mathematical truth was absolute. Either you possessed genuine understanding or you didn't. Credentials and formal training would triumph over lucky guesses and amateur enthusiasm. Sterling had spent her career building walls between intellectual elite and working class. Those barriers protected the sanctity of academic achievement, ensuring only the worthy received recognition. Soon, those walls would face their greatest test. What happens when the foundation of everything you believe begins to crumble? 3 days later, Sterling stood before a packed auditorium announcing the Euler's Challenge registration. Her enthusiasm was infectious as she described the intellectual rigor required, her passion for mathematics making her genuinely captivating for the first time in years. "This competition represents the pinnacle of mathematical achievement," she declared, her voice carrying across the hall filled with ambitious graduate students. $50,000 and automatic PhD admission await those with true intellectual depth. Her eyes sparkled with the fire that had originally drawn her to mathematics, before prejudice and arrogance clouded her vision. A Harvard graduate student raised his hand. "Professor Sterling, can all university personnel enter the competition?" Sterling's smile turned patronizing, her momentary vulnerability vanishing like smoke. "Technically, yes. But advanced mathematics requires years of formal training. We wouldn't want anyone embarrassing themselves publicly." Her gaze swept across the room, deliberately finding Jamal near the back exit where he had paused during his cleaning rounds. The message was unmistakable. "Let me demonstrate the level of sophistication required," Sterling continued, approaching the blackboard with theatrical flair. She wrote a calculus integration problem that looked deceptively simple but required advanced techniques. "Anyone unable to solve this probably shouldn't waste our time with the real competition." Students bent over notebooks, working through complex integration methods. The problem involved trigonometric functions raised to various powers, the kind that required special substitution tricks and integration by parts. After several minutes, most arrived at the correct numerical answer. Sterling nodded approvingly as students shared their solutions. "Excellent work. This represents the minimum mathematical maturity we expect." As she reached for the eraser, preparing to conclude her demonstration, Jamal's quiet voice cut through the satisfied murmur. "Professor Sterling, there's a more elegant approach, using symmetry properties." The auditorium fell silent. Every head turned toward the man in maintenance coveralls who had dared interrupt an academic presentation. Sterling's hand froze on the eraser. Her carefully practiced smile tightened as she turned to face this unprecedented challenge to her authority. "Oh, really?" Her voice dripped with condescension. "Please, enlighten us with your insights." The tension crackled as Jamal walked toward the front of the room. His presence commanded attention despite his uniform. Shoulders straight, movements confident, eyes focused on the mathematical challenge rather than the hostile stares. Sterling stepped aside with exaggerated courtesy, gesturing toward the blackboard like a matador offering a cape to a bull. Jamal picked up chalk with steady hands. His mathematical handwriting was crisp, professional, and surprisingly sophisticated. Instead of following the student's complex approaches, he used a clever substitution that exploited the symmetry of the trigonometric functions. "By recognizing that this integral has mirror symmetry," Jamal explained clearly, "we can transform it into a much simpler form. The same answer, but with half the work." His approach was mathematically beautiful, revealing why the integral had its particular value rather than just computing it through brute force. Graduate students leaned forward, following his elegant reasoning. Even Sterling found herself impressed, despite her growing alarm. The answer is the same, Jamal concluded, but this method shows the underlying mathematical structure. Scattered applause broke out before dying under Sterling's withering stare. Her competitive nature flared, threatened by this unexpected display of mathematical sophistication. In a moment of reckless pride fueled by confusion and unwilling attraction, she strode to the blackboard and wrote a complex differential equation from her own research. "Fine, if you think you're so mathematically gifted," she turned to face him, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "Solve this equation and I'll marry you." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. The joke was clearly intended to humiliate, but there was an edge of real challenge beneath the mockery. Jamal studied the problem for 30 seconds that felt like hours. Then he began writing. What happens when arrogance meets its match? Sterling's differential equation stared back at her from the blackboard like an accusation. She had written it impulsively, never expecting the janitor to attempt a solution. This was graduate-level mathematics, something that had taken her weeks to solve during her doctoral research. The auditorium held its breath as Jamal approached the problem with methodical precision. His chalk moved across the board with surprising confidence, each symbol placed deliberately. Sterling watched his technique, looking for signs of confusion or hesitation that would confirm her worldview. They never came. Instead, Jamal worked through the complex equation step by step. He identified the problem type, chose the right mathematical tools, and applied them with the fluidity of someone who understood the underlying structure. Within 5 minutes, he had produced a complete solution. Sterling's face drained of color as she verified his work. Every step was correct. The answer matched her own research exactly. "Professor Sterling," Jamal said quietly, setting down the chalk, "the solution checks out. Would you like me to verify the boundary conditions?" The room erupted in stunned whispers. Students pulled out phones, recognizing they were witnessing something unprecedented. Word spread through social media like wildfire. A janitor had just solved a research-level problem in front of Harvard's best and brightest. "Lucky guess," Sterling managed, her voice lacking its usual confidence. "One problem doesn't prove mathematical maturity. Anyone can memorize techniques without understanding theory." But her protest rang hollow. The elegance of Jamal's solution revealed deep comprehension, not mere memorization. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, visiting from Stanford as a guest lecturer, had been watching from the back of the auditorium. Her experienced eye recognized genuine mathematical talent when she saw it. Something about Jamal's approach felt familiar, though she couldn't place why. "That was quite impressive," Dr. Rodriguez said, approaching the front. "Your method was both rigorous and insightful." Sterling's jaw tightened. Having another professor praise the janitor threatened everything she had built her career upon. "Since you're so confident, mister," Sterling's voice carried barely controlled frustration. "Washington, Jamal Washington. Mr. Washington, I officially invite you to enter the Eilers Challenge, but when you fail publicly, remember, I tried to spare you the embarrassment. The gauntlet was thrown. Academic pride versus working-class determination. The entire mathematics community would be watching." Registration opened the following morning. Sterling conducted preliminary screening personally, unusual for a department head, but she needed to maintain control. If Jamal was going to humiliate himself, she wanted front-row seats. The screening required solving 3 increasingly difficult problems. Sterling designed them specifically to expose gaps in informal education, problems requiring years of structured learning to master. 12 candidates gathered in the conference room. 11 were graduate students from prestigious universities with impeccable academic pedigrees. Then there was Jamal, still wearing his maintenance uniform, looking completely out of place among the academic elite. Derek Carter from Harvard cracked his knuckles confidently. Sarah Mitchell, Sterling's own protege, reviewed her notes one final time. Alex Thompson from Yale adjusted his designer glasses with practiced arrogance. "You have 90 minutes, Sterling announced. "Solve all 3 problems completely. Problem 1 involved finding the maximum value of a function with constraints. While others worked through lengthy calculations, Jamal used geometric reasoning to visualize the problem. He saw the solution as a point where two curves touched, solving it with elegant simplicity rather than brute force computation. Problem 2 required analyzing a special type of matrix. Graduate students worked through complex formulas and solved multiple equations. Jamal immediately recognized a pattern in the matrix structure, reading the answer directly without lengthy calculations. Problem 3 was a famous historical problem about infinite series. This stumped most candidates, who attempted various advanced techniques. Jamal surprised everyone by explaining the classical approach that the great mathematician Euler had used centuries ago, demonstrating knowledge of mathematical history that impressed even the most skeptical observers. "Time," Sterling called, though her voice had lost its commanding edge. As solutions were reviewed, a disturbing pattern emerged. Jamal's answers weren't just correct, they were consistently more elegant than those of PhD candidates. His approaches revealed a deeper understanding of mathematical structure and history. Dr. Rodriguez examined the papers with growing fascination. Jamal's mathematical style triggered memories she couldn't quite grasp, something about his notation, his proof techniques, his choice of methods. "All candidates pass," Sterling announced reluctantly. "The competition begins tomorrow." But the real competition had already begun in Sterling's mind. Her worldview was cracking under the pressure of undeniable evidence. How could someone without formal education demonstrate such sophisticated mathematical understanding? That evening, alone in her office, Sterling researched Jamal Washington online. She found nothing. No academic publications, no university records, no trace of mathematical training. The mystery deepened her frustration and unwilling fascination. Social media exploded with coverage of the unprecedented qualifying session. Janitor's professor began trending internationally. Mathematics departments worldwide debated the implications. Could genuine talent exist outside traditional academic channels? Sterling's Harvard boyfriend called that night, his voice dripping with condescension. "Catherine, surely you're not taking this janitor seriously? It's embarrassing for the department." But Sterling couldn't shake the image of Jamal's confident chalkwork, his elegant solutions, his quiet dignity under pressure. For the first time in her career, she questioned whether intelligence might not follow the predictable patterns she had always assumed. The stakes were rising beyond academic pride. Her reputation, her beliefs about merit and education, her entire professional identity hung in the balance. How far would she go to protect everything she thought she knew about genius? The main auditorium buzzed with electric anticipation. 800 seats packed with students, faculty, and curious onlookers who had heard whispers of the janitor who dared challenge academic royalty. International live-stream viewers climbed toward 25,000 as word spread through mathematics communities worldwide. Sterling stood at the podium, her designer suit and confident demeanor projecting absolute authority. As department head and head judge, she controlled every aspect of the competition. This was her domain, her rules, her moment to restore natural order. "Welcome to the annual Euler's Challenge," she announced, her voice carrying across the hushed auditorium. "Today we celebrate mathematical excellence in its purest form. True mathematical maturity comes from years of rigorous training and proper preparation." Her eyes found Jamal among the 12 qualified contestants. The subtext was unmistakable. The competition format was elegantly brutal. 3 rounds of escalating difficulty with elimination at each stage. Round 1 would cut 12 contestants to 6. Semifinals would narrow 6 to 3. The championship round would crown a single winner. Sterling had designed the progression specifically to favor formal education over raw talent. Each round would require increasingly advanced knowledge typically acquired only through years of graduate school. "Our judging panel represents mathematical excellence," Sterling continued, introducing professors from Harvard, MIT, and Stanford. Dr. Rodriguez nodded politely from her position, though something in her expression suggested growing unease with the proceedings. The contestants were introduced one by one. Derek Carter, Harvard graduate student; Sarah Mitchell, Sterling's star pupil with multiple published papers; Alex Thompson from Yale; Marcus Rodriguez from MIT; Jennifer Kim from Berkeley. Each introduction highlighted prestigious universities and impressive achievements. Then came Jamal Washington, simply identified as University Maintenance Staff. Awkward silence filled the auditorium. A few scattered chuckles from the audience reflected the absurdity everyone felt witnessing a janitor among the academic elite. Sterling's smile widened with satisfaction. The contrast couldn't be more perfect for her purposes. "Round 1 begins now," she announced. "Contestants will solve problems at individual whiteboards while our audience observes. Complete transparency ensures integrity." The elimination problem appeared on the main screen. "Prove that adding the first few odd numbers always gives you a perfect square." This was intentionally straightforward, something any college mathematics student should handle easily. Sterling wanted to build confidence in her legitimate candidates while giving Jamal enough rope to hang himself publicly. Most contestants attacked the problem with formal mathematical proofs. They wrote complex formulas, used advanced logical reasoning, and followed prescribed academic methods. Their solutions were textbook perfect, exactly what any professor would expect from graduate students. But Jamal did something completely unexpected. While others filled their boards with complicated equations, he drew simple pictures. He arranged dots in square patterns, showing how adding odd numbers created larger and larger perfect squares. Each dot represented a number, and the visual pattern made the mathematical truth immediately obvious. "Look," he explained to the amazed audience, his voice carrying clearly through the microphone. "Math isn't about memorizing complex formulas. It's about seeing the underlying pattern." His visual proof was instant and beautiful. Anyone in the audience could understand it just by looking, even without mathematics training. The dots formed perfect squares that grew naturally as you added more numbers. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward with genuine excitement. "Absolutely brilliant," she whispered to her fellow judges. "That's real mathematical insight." The live stream chat exploded with appreciation from viewers worldwide. Comments flooded in. "I finally understand math. Why don't teachers explain it this way? Pure genius." Sterling's confidence wavered as she witnessed the audience's enthusiastic reaction. Visual proofs were perfectly valid mathematics, but they revealed a type of natural insight that couldn't be taught through rote memorization. "Mr. Washington's approach is creative," she managed, her voice tight with barely concealed anxiety. "But advanced mathematics requires more than pictures. Real mathematical theory demands rigorous formal methods." Her dismissive tone fooled no one. Everyone could see she was rattled. Round 1 results were announced. All contestants advanced to semifinals, but the audience's energy clearly favored Jamal's innovative solution over the mechanical textbook approaches. During the break, social media erupted worldwide. #Janitor Genius trended internationally. Academic Twitter is divided into heated debates about talent versus formal education. Romantic shippers emerged with #Sterling Washington hashtags, fascinated by the obvious tension between the brilliant professor and mysterious maintenance worker. University board members arrived to observe what had become an international phenomenon. Sterling's Harvard ex-boyfriend flew in specifically to witness what he called Catherine's amusing little circus. Major news networks sent crews as they recognized the broader cultural story unfolding. Dr. Rodriguez approached Sterling privately during intermission, her expression deeply concerned. "Catherine, this competition format seems unusually harsh. Are you sure the problem difficulty is appropriate?" "We maintain the highest standards," Sterling replied defensively, though sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. "Mathematical excellence requires no compromises." But Rodriguez's worried look suggested she recognized something troubling in Sterling's motivations. As semifinals approached, Sterling announced the next round would focus on graduate-level analysis, her personal area of expertise in the most technical field requiring years of specialized training. For the first time, Jamal looked genuinely uncertain. The advanced mathematics ahead was far beyond anything he could visualize with simple pictures. Sterling's triumphant smile returned as she sensed victory within reach. What happens when natural talent faces its ultimate test? The night before the semifinals changed everything. Jamal sat alone in the university library at 2 a.m., surrounded by thick textbooks that might as well have been written in a foreign language. The advanced mathematics ahead wasn't like the problems he'd solved before. This time, clever thinking and visual patterns wouldn't be enough. He was entering Sterling's world now, a realm of specialized knowledge that typically required years of graduate school to master. Meanwhile, Sterling couldn't sleep. She paced her elegant apartment, designer heels clicking against hardwood floors. Tomorrow's problems were specifically designed to eliminate Jamal once and for all. She should feel victorious, but instead, a strange emptiness gnawed at her chest. Why did proving herself right feel so much like losing? Despite the overwhelming challenge, something remarkable began to happen. Jamal started connecting the advanced concepts to simpler ideas he already understood. Complex mathematical theories weren't completely foreign. They were extensions of basic principles he'd mastered years ago, like learning that a mansion was built using the same bricks as a simple house. "I can do this," he whispered to himself, finding familiar patterns hidden beneath intimidating terminology. His natural intuition was guiding him through uncharted territory. Online viewers watching the library security cameras were amazed. Comments flooded in. "He's teaching himself graduate-level math in one night. This is impossible, but it's happening." But the next morning brought unwelcome visitors. University security questioned Jamal's after-hours library access. Someone had filed an anonymous complaint about inappropriate use of educational resources by non-academic personnel. Sterling's fingerprints were all over the harassment, though she maintained plausible deniability. "Perhaps maintenance staff should focus on their assigned duties," the security chief suggested coldly. "Academic facilities are reserved for legitimate educational purposes." The message was crystal clear: stay in your lane. During the pre-competition briefing, Derek Carter approached Jamal hesitantly. The Harvard graduate student had spent the night reconsidering everything he'd witnessed. "I need to tell you something," Derek said quietly. "Watching you solve problems has taught me more about real mathematics than 3 years of graduate school. You see connections that the rest of us miss completely." Sarah Mitchell nodded in agreement. "Professor Sterling taught us formulas, but you understand the underlying meaning. That's much more valuable." Even his former rivals were beginning to recognize genuine brilliance when they saw it. However, media attention brought vicious criticism alongside growing support. Academic elitists used social media to question whether someone without proper qualifications belonged in serious mathematical discourse. "This is a publicity stunt that damages the integrity of higher education," wrote Dr. Harrison Webb, Sterling's Harvard boyfriend, in a widely shared editorial. "Mathematical competence requires systematic training, not amateur theatrics." The attacks became personal, targeting Jamal's appearance, background, and presumptuous challenge to established academic order. Sterling amplified these criticisms through carefully worded public statements about maintaining rigorous standards. Something clicked during Jamal's final preparation session. The advanced mathematical concepts weren't as mysterious as they initially appeared. They followed logical patterns he could trace and understand, despite the intimidating technical language. He realized that mathematics was like a vast, interconnected web. Every advanced idea connected to simpler concepts through logical threads. Once you saw those connections, the complexity became manageable. "It's all the same mathematics," he told himself with growing confidence, "just different ways of looking at the same underlying truth." But university policy prohibited unpaid leave for personal activities. Jamal still worked his regular cleaning shifts while preparing for the most important mathematical challenge of his life. By Thursday, exhaustion was taking its toll. Sterling noticed him struggling to stay alert during a break between rounds. "Perhaps demanding work schedules aren't compatible with serious academic pursuits," she commented loudly enough for news cameras to capture. "Some people simply aren't positioned for this level of intellectual commitment." The cruel observation stung because it contained a grain of truth. Jamal was fighting this battle while carrying burdens his competitors couldn't imagine. Semi-final day arrived with the auditorium buzzing with anticipation. 6 contestants took their positions as the problem appeared on the main screen, its technical language intimidating to most viewers. Determine the convergence properties of this infinite mathematical series and analyze its behavior. To general audiences, it looked impossibly complex. But Jamal saw past the scary terminology to the underlying question: does this mathematical pattern stabilize or spiral out of control? While other contestants mechanically applied memorized formulas, Jamal used intuitive reasoning to understand what the problem was really asking. He drew simple graphs showing how the mathematical series behaved, sometimes settling into predictable patterns, sometimes growing wildly. "Think of it like a bouncing ball," he explained to the audience, his voice calm and clear. "Sometimes the bounces get smaller and eventually stop. Sometimes they get bigger and never end. The mathematics tells us which type of behavior we're dealing with." His explanation made graduate-level analysis accessible to ordinary people while remaining completely accurate. The auditorium exploded in appreciation. Dr. Rodriguez stood and applauded openly, her eyes shining with admiration. "Extraordinary," she announced to the judging panel. "This demonstrates the deepest possible understanding of mathematical principles. He's not just solving problems, he's revealing the beauty hidden within complex theory." Even Sterling felt a surge of unwilling respect. This wasn't luck or clever guessing. This was genuine mathematical brilliance operating at the highest level. When results were announced, 3 contestants remained: Sarah Mitchell, Sterling's star student, Derek Carter, Harvard's representative, and Jamal Washington, the janitor who refused to accept limitations. International viewership peaked at 75,000 people. Academic institutions worldwide watched to see whether their fundamental assumptions about intelligence and education would survive this unprecedented challenge. That evening, Sterling crafted the ultimate test. She selected a problem from her own doctoral dissertation, something that had taken her 3 years to solve with full university resources, expert advisors, and unlimited time. If anything could expose the limits of self-education and natural talent, this would be it. "Tomorrow's final problem will require the deepest possible mathematical sophistication," she announced to assembled media. "Only authentic mathematical maturity will suffice." Jamal stood alone in his small apartment that night, looking at his mother's medical bills piled on the kitchen table. Tomorrow's competition would determine everything: her treatment, his future, his dreams of returning to the academic world he'd been forced to abandon. But more than money was at stake. Millions of people who'd been underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed were watching to see if raw talent could triumph over institutional prejudice. Dr. Rodriguez sat in her hotel room, still troubled by the familiar feeling she couldn't shake. Something about Jamal's mathematical approach kept triggering memories she couldn't quite access. His style, his intuition, his way of seeing problems, it all felt like encountering an old friend whose name she'd forgotten. Tomorrow would bring the ultimate test of everything they all believed about genius, education, and human potential. Could one man's brilliance overcome a system designed to exclude him? Championship morning arrived with unprecedented fanfare. News crews positioned cameras throughout the auditorium. The live stream audience had swollen to over 100,000 viewers worldwide, all waiting to witness the final showdown between genius and prejudice. Sterling took the stage with unusual confidence, her designer suit immaculate, her expression radiating absolute control. She had spent the entire night crafting what she considered the perfect trap. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium, "today's final challenge represents true mathematical excellence. Given the unprecedented international attention this competition has received, I'm implementing what I call the Sterling Standard, the most rigorous examination of mathematical maturity ever attempted." Dr. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in her judging seat. Something about Sterling's tone suggested this wasn't about mathematical excellence anymore. This felt personal. Instead of a single problem, Sterling announced a brutal 3-part gauntlet designed to crush any hope Jamal might have harbored. First, solve a research-level problem in 90 minutes. Second, present the solution to a panel of expert mathematicians. Third, defend the approach against aggressive questioning from specialists. "This format will separate authentic mathematical maturity from enthusiastic guesswork," Sterling declared, her eyes finding Jamal among the 3 remaining contestants. The real betrayal came when the problem appeared on the main screen. Jamal's blood ran cold as he recognized what Sterling had done. This wasn't just difficult, it was her own doctoral research, a challenge she had spent 3 years solving with unlimited resources and expert guidance. The technical language looked intimidating to the audience, but mathematicians in the room immediately understood the impossible situation Sterling had created. This required specialized knowledge from multiple graduate fields that typically took years to master properly. Sarah Mitchell and Derek Carter exchanged knowing glances. As graduate students in Sterling's academic circle, they had encountered variations of this problem in her advanced seminars. They possessed years of relevant coursework and direct access to Sterling's published research methods. Jamal had 90 minutes to solve what Sterling herself had needed 3 years to complete. Murmurs of discontent rippled through the auditorium as the mathematical community recognized the setup. The live stream chat exploded with outrage from viewers worldwide who understood they were witnessing academic fraud in real time. Dr. Rodriguez stood up, her face flushed with anger. "Catherine, this complexity problem seems entirely inappropriate for a general mathematics competition." "Excellence demands the highest standards," Sterling replied coldly, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "We cannot lower our expectations simply because some participants lack proper preparation." Sterling's gaze locked onto Jamal as she delivered her final psychological blow. "You have 90 minutes to prove you belong among serious mathematicians. Anyone unable to demonstrate authentic mathematical sophistication should consider withdrawing gracefully rather than embarrassing themselves further." The timer began its merciless countdown. Jamal stared at the impossible problem, recognizing immediately that Sterling had transported the competition into territory where his self-education couldn't possibly reach. For the first time, his unshakable confidence began to crack. What happens when natural talent faces a completely rigged game? The auditorium fell into suffocating silence as the 90-minute timer began its relentless countdown. 100,000 viewers worldwide held their breath, watching 3 mathematicians face Sterling's impossible challenge. Sarah and Derek immediately dove into familiar territory, their years of graduate training guiding them through Sterling's specialized research methods. They wrote confidently, building upon foundations laid in countless seminars and study sessions with access to all her published work. Jamal stared at the problem like a man facing his execution. The first 30 minutes were pure agony. While his competitors filled their whiteboards with sophisticated equations, Jamal struggled to find any entry point into Sterling's labyrinthine challenge. Mathematical physics required knowledge he simply didn't possess. Advanced theories, specialized techniques, frameworks that demanded years of formal study to understand properly. His whiteboard remained painfully empty, except for a few tentative scratches that led nowhere. Sterling provided commentary for the live stream audience, her voice dripping with vindicated satisfaction. "We're witnessing the fundamental difference between authentic mathematical education and amateur enthusiasm. Advanced problems require systematic knowledge built over many years of rigorous study." By minute 45, the cameras captured Jamal's growing desperation. He started multiple approaches, erased them, tried again. Each false start revealed the depth of his disadvantage more clearly to the watching world. Meanwhile, Sarah and Derek steadily progressed through Sterling's expected solution path, their formal training providing detailed roadmaps through the complex theoretical landscape that Jamal was navigating blind. Comments flooded the live stream with crushing observations. "He's completely lost. This is painful to watch." Sterling was right about needing proper education. The janitor finally hit his limit. Academic Twitter erupted with vindicated reactions from Sterling's supporters. The narrative was shifting rapidly from underdog triumph to amateur exposure by harsh reality. Everything Sterling had predicted was coming true before a global audience. At minute 60, disaster struck. Jamal made a critical error in his third attempt, misapplying a theorem he only partially understood from hasty textbook reading. The mistake cascaded through his work like a virus, invalidating everything he had painstakingly built. He stood motionless, chalk trembling in his hand, staring at equations that mocked his inadequacy. For the first time in his adult life, Jamal Washington looked utterly defeated. Sterling's voice cut through the silence like a blade designed for maximum damage. "Perhaps we should allow struggling participants to withdraw with dignity rather than continue this painful display. Some challenges simply exceed the limits of informal preparation." The suggestion landed like a physical blow. News cameras zoomed in on Jamal's face, capturing the exact moment when unshakable confidence crumbled into doubt and shame. This image would be replayed millions of times, the moment a genius met its match against institutional knowledge. Sterling continued her psychological assault, addressing the global audience with clinical precision. This demonstrates exactly why academic standards exist. Mathematical sophistication cannot be improvised or wished into existence. It requires proper foundations, systematic training, and institutional support that simply cannot be replaced by enthusiasm. Every word felt designed to crush Jamal's spirit completely, while justifying everything Sterling had always believed about intelligence and social hierarchy. At minute 75, Jamal set his chalk down and closed his eyes. He appeared ready to concede defeat gracefully, accepting that natural talent had finally met an insurmountable wall. The auditorium held its breath as he seemed to gather himself for a dignified withdrawal. Sterling's triumphant smile suggested she had finally proven her fundamental point about the necessity of formal education and proper credentials. But then Dr. Rodriguez rose from her judging position, unable to remain silent any longer. "Before we continue," Rodriguez announced, her voice carrying unusual authority that commanded attention throughout the silent auditorium, "I want to remind everyone that mathematical history is filled with breakthrough discoveries made by individuals who ignored conventional wisdom and found new paths to truth." She wasn't helping Jamal directly, but her words carried deeper meaning that resonated through the tension. The most profound insights often come from minds unbound by traditional approaches. Sometimes the greatest mathematical truths are found by those brave enough to see problems through completely fresh eyes. Rodriguez's intervention triggered something deep in Jamal's consciousness. A memory surfaced from years ago during his abandoned graduate studies at MIT. Not identical to Sterling's challenge, but related through underlying mathematical principles that transcended her specialized approach. Sterling's formulation was sophisticated and technical, but maybe there was a classical pathway that could bypass all the specialized machinery she expected. Jamal opened his eyes and reached for his chalk with sudden, renewed purpose. Could 15 minutes be enough to attempt the impossible? Jamal picked up his chalk with trembling hands, but his eyes now burned with desperate determination. 15 minutes remained on the clock. Barely enough time to write his name, let alone solve Sterling's 3-year doctoral problem. The entire auditorium watched in stunned silence as he began erasing his previous failed attempts. Instead of following the advanced theoretical pathway that Sterling expected, Jamal started writing something completely different. He was going back to basics. While Sarah and Derek continued building elaborate modern solutions using cutting-edge mathematical machinery, Jamal began constructing his approach using classical techniques from the foundations of mathematical analysis. Methods that were old when Sterling's grandmother was born, but possessed an elegant simplicity that transcended specialized knowledge. "What is he doing?" whispered a Harvard professor in the audience. Sterling watched with growing alarm as Jamal's whiteboard filled with unfamiliar but mathematically valid reasoning. This wasn't the solution path she had spent 3 years developing. This was something else entirely. With 10 minutes left, Jamal's approach began taking shape. He was treating Sterling's complex boundary value problem as a minimization challenge, finding the mathematical configuration that required the least energy, like water naturally flowing downhill to find the lowest point. His chalk moved with increasing confidence as the classical methods revealed their power. Where Sterling had used advanced functional analysis, Jamal employed direct variational techniques. Where she had relied on sophisticated operator theory, he used elegant energy estimates that any graduate student could follow. The mathematical community in the audience began stirring with recognition. This wasn't amateur fumbling. This was a completely valid alternative approach to one of the most challenging problems in mathematical physics. Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward, her eyes widening with amazement. She had seen this style before, this particular way of seeing problems through classical lenses. The memory was almost within reach now. Time expired. Jamal stepped back from his whiteboard, which displayed a complete solution using methods that hadn't been fashionable in decades, but remained mathematically bulletproof. Sterling stared at his work in shocked silence. Her 3-year struggle with advanced techniques had been bypassed by approaches she had dismissed as outdated. "Ladies and gentlemen," the competition director announced, "we now move to the presentation phase. Each finalist will have 20 minutes to explain their solution." Sarah went first, delivering a competent but unremarkable explanation of Sterling's published methodology. Derek followed with similar results, solid, predictable, forgettable. Then came Jamal's turn. He approached the microphone with quiet dignity, his maintenance uniform a stark contrast to his competitor's academic attire, but his presence commanding absolute attention from the global audience. "I solved this problem using classical variational methods," Jamal began, his voice steady and clear. "While examining the challenge, I realized it could be understood as asking a fundamental question. What mathematical shape minimizes energy while satisfying the given constraints?" Sterling interrupted sharply, unable to contain herself. "Mr. Washington, this problem requires advanced functional analysis and operator theory. Classical methods are insufficient for nonlinear boundary value problems of this sophistication." Jamal turned to face her directly, his response carrying the weight of everything he had endured. "Professor Sterling, with respect, I believe your assumption about required methods may be unnecessarily limiting. Sometimes the most sophisticated tools aren't necessary if you choose the right approach. Mathematics doesn't care about fashion, it only cares about truth." The room stirred with electric tension. Did the janitor just suggest that the department head's methodology was unnecessarily complicated? "This is undergraduate-level hand-waving," Sterling snapped, her composure finally cracking under pressure. "Where's the rigor? Where's the advanced analysis that separates real mathematicians from enthusiasts?" Dr. Rodriguez stood up abruptly. "Actually, Catherine, I'd like to verify Mr. Washington's approach myself." The next 15 minutes felt like hours as Rodriguez and two other expert judges examined Jamal's proof on auxiliary whiteboards. The auditorium held its collective breath while 100,000 viewers worldwide watched the verification process unfold in real time. Mathematical notation filled sideboards as the experts traced through Jamal's reasoning step by step. His energy minimization approach was not only correct, but revealed deeper insights into why Sterling's problem had been difficult in the first place. Finally, Dr. Rodriguez returned to her microphone, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to announce that Mr. Washington's solution is mathematically rigorous, complete, and brilliant. He has solved a research-level problem using classical techniques in a way that illuminates the underlying structure that makes this problem challenging." The auditorium erupted in thunderous applause. Live stream viewers exploded with celebration. Academic Twitter burst into praise from mathematicians worldwide who recognized they had witnessed something extraordinary. Sterling's world crumbled in real time as her authority was publicly undermined by someone she had dismissed as unqualified. The prejudice that had seemed so reasonable was exposed as blind arrogance before a global audience. "But this approach ignores critical technical details," Sterling protested desperately. "What about regularity theory, Sobolev embeddings, compactness arguments?" Jamal maintained perfect composure as he delivered the knockout blow. "Professor Sterling, those techniques are certainly powerful and have their place in mathematics, but they're not always necessary. I've demonstrated that classical methods suffice for this particular problem. Perhaps the beauty of mathematics is that there are often multiple paths to truth, and sometimes the simplest path is the most elegant." A Harvard professor observing via live stream typed in the chat, "This solution should be published immediately." An MIT mathematician added, "Extraordinary insight. This approach is actually superior to the standard methods." The expert judging panel reached their unanimous decision. Dr. Rodriguez approached the main microphone as cameras focused on her face. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have our winner, Jamal Washington." The auditorium exploded in celebration. Standing ovations from mathematicians who understood they had witnessed history. News crews captured the moment when merit triumphed over prejudice. Live stream viewers sharing the moment across social media platforms worldwide. Sterling sat in her judge's chair, stunned into silence. The problem that had formed the foundation of her doctoral dissertation, her claim to mathematical sophistication and academic authority, had been solved in 90 minutes by someone she had spent weeks trying to eliminate. Someone in the audience shouted over the celebration, "So when's the wedding, Professor Sterling?" Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd as everyone remembered her flippant marriage proposal from days earlier. Sterling's face burned with embarrassment as her cruel joke returned to haunt her before cameras that would broadcast this moment to millions. But instead of humiliating Sterling further, Jamal approached the microphone one final time. Mathematics brought us together today through this competition. I hope it continues to bring people together across all boundaries and assumptions about where intelligence can be found. His grace in victory made Sterling's attraction to him complete. Not just intellectual respect, but genuine admiration for someone who had proven himself her superior in every way that truly mattered. What happens when prejudice meets its match in both brilliance and character? As the celebration reached its peak, Dr. Rodriguez approached the main microphone with an expression that silenced the cheering crowd. Her face carried the weight of a shocking revelation. "Before we conclude," Rodriguez announced, "I have something important to share with everyone." The auditorium fell silent. Sterling looked up from her devastated state, wondering what could possibly happen next. Throughout this competition, I've been troubled by familiar feelings about Mr. Washington's mathematical style. His approach, his insights, his elegant solutions, they reminded me of someone exceptional I once knew. Rodriguez paused, her eyes finding Jamal among the contestants. I finally remembered. Jamal Washington was one of my most brilliant doctoral students at MIT 7 years ago. The revelation struck like lightning. Sterling's face went completely pale as the implications crashed over her. Rodriguez produced an official MIT folder. Mr. Washington completed all PhD coursework with highest distinction. He had finished qualifying exams, passed comprehensive reviews, and was deep into dissertation research under my supervision. The devastating details continued. His record, 3.94 GPA in graduate coursework, 2 published papers in leading journals, outstanding teaching assistant award, and the prestigious Sloan Research Fellowship. The stunned silence was deafening. Sterling realized she had systematically humiliated someone whose academic credentials exceeded her own. Mr. Washington withdrew voluntarily during his final year to care for his mother during cancer treatment. His departure was a tremendous loss to our community. The institutional reckoning was immediate. University administrators understood they had employed a PhD-level mathematician as a janitor for 5 years due to their own prejudicial blindness. Sterling's cruel marriage joke now seemed tragically ironic. She had made that flippant proposal to someone more academically accomplished than most faculty members. The live stream exploded with shock and outrage. Viewers realized they had witnessed systematic prejudice exposing itself before the world. Jamal's phone buzzed with messages from MIT offering immediate readmission and full funding. Harvard, Stanford, and Princeton followed within minutes. But as cameras focused on Sterling's humiliated expression, everyone wondered the same thing. How would the woman who had spent weeks trying to destroy him react to discovering she had targeted someone who was not just her intellectual equal, but her superior in every measurable way? The most important conversation was yet to come. What happens when pride meets the unforgivable truth about itself? Hours later, the auditorium had emptied except for 2 people. Sterling sat alone in the front row, staring at the whiteboards where her worldview had been systematically dismantled. Jamal approached quietly, still wearing his maintenance uniform despite the offers pouring in from elite universities worldwide. "Catherine," he said softly, using her first name for the first time. She looked up with tears in her eyes. "I owe you more than an apology. I owe you recognition of who you really are, and acknowledgement of who I became in trying to destroy you." Her voice broke with genuine remorse. "I let prejudice blind me to brilliance. I'm ashamed of every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every moment I treated you as less than human." Jamal sat beside her, his presence gentle despite everything she had done. "Catherine, you're not the first person to judge by appearances, but you might be the first to truly understand what you were wrong about." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility. "About my ridiculous marriage proposal," Sterling whispered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Jamal smiled, the first genuine warmth he had shown her. "Are you withdrawing the offer?" "Actually." Sterling turned to face him fully, vulnerability replacing arrogance for the first time. "If you're willing to get to know the real me, not the prejudiced professor, but the woman who just learned something profound about herself, I'd like to take you to dinner, as equals." "I'd like that, Catherine. I think we both have a lot to learn from each other." 6 months later, university headlines told an extraordinary story. Dr. Jamal Washington had returned to complete his PhD while serving as a visiting researcher. Professor Sterling had established a scholarship program identifying overlooked talent among all university staff. Their relationship had blossomed into something neither expected, love built on mutual respect and intellectual equality. But their story sparked something larger. Social media movements encouraged people to look beyond uniforms and job titles. Universities nationwide reviewed their hiring practices. Countless stories emerged of brilliant minds working in unexpected places. The voiceover that had opened this journey returned with quiet power. Intelligence doesn't wear a uniform. Brilliance doesn't require a pedigree. Love doesn't follow social hierarchies. How many extraordinary minds are you overlooking today? How many assumptions are you making about the people serving your coffee, cleaning your offices, or working jobs society deems ordinary? The next time you meet someone, look beyond the surface. Listen to their ideas. Respect their knowledge. You might discover that the person you least expect is exactly who you most need to know. If this story changed how you see people, share it. If it made you question your assumptions, comment below. And if you've ever been underestimated, tell us your story. Subscribe to Black Tales Stories for more stories that challenge us to find the extraordinary hiding in plain sight. The final image showed Sterling and Jamal walking across campus together. Professor and returning PhD student, equals in love and mathematics, proof that the most beautiful equations are sometimes found in the human heart. What extraordinary person are you going to notice today?